University of Minnesota, Rochester, our town.
Welcome to Our Town, the show about Rochester. I'm Nicole Fenoy-Amhara, and today we are kicking off our Rochester City Council candidate discussions with Ward 1C candidates. Stick around.
Our Town is brought to you in part by the following amazing people and organizations:
the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, and the citizens of Minnesota.
And the members of KSMQ Public Television. Thank you.
Ward 1 covers a large area of central and southern Rochester. With Ed Hruska deciding not to run for re-election, there's an open seat. And we're joined today by candidates Heather Holmes and Patrick Keane. Welcome to Our Town.
Thanks for having us.
So let's start by having you tell us a little bit about yourselves, and I'll start with you, Heather.
Sure. Well, Heather Holmes, and I'm running, as you said, for Ward 1 City Council. I actually grew up in North Dakota, born and raised in a rural community. I graduated high school with 8 people, so 7 boys and myself. And I went on, I joined the Army National Guard. I was a diesel mechanic for 6 years, so keeping in line with the male gender population. And I did journalism and reporting for about 10 to 12 years of my life out east. Wanted to get back home, and I ended up in Rochester. What was great about Rochester, which I've lived here for a decade, is I recently got into economic development about 5 years ago and found that to be a really passionate point for me, because you can work with all different types of people, workforce, the economy, things that really matter on a day-to-day basis in the lives of everybody and all the citizens in Rochester and the region. So I'm looking forward to carrying on that representation on City Council.
Patrick?
Hi, Nicole. I grew up in Chicago, and I came to Minnesota as a 17-year-old for school. When it came time for look for work, I had job offers here in Minnesota. I had job offers in Chicago and also on the West Coast. And what I remember most is I did not want to live back in Chicago. I didn't take the job in Rochester as much as I took a job working for IBM, because at the time working for IBM was quite a thrill for me. Around the same time, or a couple years later, I bought my first home and my only home in Meadow Park, where I still live. I bought it as a single guy, and my wife and I ended up raising our 3 adult children in that same house. As parents, we took full advantage of the Rochester Public Schools. We took full advantage of the community, things like scouting, sports teams, educational offerings. And we're proud to say now our kids are living independently around parts of Minnesota, and we're the proud grandparents of 4 grandsons. I've always been like an active volunteer, but since I retired in 2015, I've been getting more involved in things. I'm on some city boards, some county things. I've been involved heavily with the schools over the years and sports and coaching, but more recently, the thing I'm most proud of over my years is I've been an engaged volunteer with our YMCA since the mid-90s, and I've been on the board, and I was the board chairman for a couple of years. The YMCA is just a jewel asset here in the community. I'm very proud of my work with them.
Thank you both. So we're here in October, though it feels like December, and you've been out and about in your neighborhoods, talking to your community members as potential candidates. And what have you been hearing? What are some of the top issues? Maybe the one top issue that you're hearing from your community.
Well, first off, Nicole, just to put it in perspective, I've been to a lot of doorways, and that's really what my campaign's all about. And by and large, people are kind of like, hey, we're glad there's people out there willing to do this. We're busy with our own careers and jobs and kids and things, and that's probably the more standard thing. But there are things that come up, and a couple of the ones that I brought up has been ash borer trees. The emerald ash borer is a disease of the trees, and it's really hit Meadow Park hard, and there's a lot of people concerned with how the city's either taking down trees or treating them and how it's communicating with the people. I'm surprised in the southwest areas there's a lot of issues with groundwater, where stormwater is running off a certain way for 10 years, 20 years, and then somebody puts in a new subdivision or something changes, and all of a sudden the water flows change. And these are things the community needs the city to be involved in. The one that comes up strongest for me, or did early on in the campaigning, around the time we were doing North Broadway, was the need, the issue with the city putting in bike lanes on the major roads. That was a real emotional point for a lot of the residents of Ward 1, and it's something that I'm very well aware of.
Heather?
I would agree with the stormwater. That was coming up a lot and still does come up when I'm going door to door and meeting with neighbors. That is something I think that the city has to look into. And then ordinances. So when you're talking to folks, they're not using the terminology ordinances, but the communication piece. They do feel as though there's a fracture in the listening pipeline, if you will. How to communicate with the city and who is their representative. Who can they go to and come to? And as the city continues to grow, they don't really know where they can go. And some of these folks, they understand they might have a city representative, but if they haven't heard from them in a while or just don't know where to go because of the sheer massive ambiguity of it all, that's where I found that the most genuine concern and question is, are you going to be the person that I can call or contact or email if I have a question? And I mean, I've sent many thank you cards back and contacted many of these individuals that I've talked to and just met at the doors for that very reason, to show them that that's a genuine value that I'll bring to the seat.
Okay. To jump on that issue of communication, how do you propose improving communication between City Council and the different communities?
As far as within the communities, there's a lot, again, go back to this, there's a lot of people who are fine being left alone unless there's something close to them. But then there are many more people who want to be tied in a loop. And I know that some city council members, they've got things like monthly coffee at some place in their community or a lunchtime meeting. Whoever wants to come can come. I'd like to start some of those kinds of things. There's all kinds of other things with technology and being available to phone numbers, but I think there is also this ability to, like what I've been doing as I've been walking, is trying to make these lists of, here's a person who's very concerned about the Civic Theater, and I try to make notes of that in my things so that if something come up, I know those people I can get back to after walking. So, I mean, part of it is, you know, this sort of active trying to do stuff. There's always the passive of being able to be available when people call. But I think it's more important to create a network and have access to those people. Gosh, there's a guy in Meadow Park who knows more about ash borer trees than I ever knew possible. That he really knows that the bigger problem is we're buying hybrid trees instead of natural trees, and it's causing a lot of problems. And those sort of expertise I want to keep access to.
Communication. I've had the benefit, when I'm not working, I'm volunteering, and you and I have actually done some things together. And one of the pieces of that I've had the benefit of is a network that's already in place. So when we're talking about the communication piece, there is a lot of that comes down to, I may not have the answers, but I know who to go to for those answers, so I can be that pipeline for whatever that individual or that resident or neighbor might have a question in regards to. Communications on the city level, I think we can improve upon that. We've seen some things play out, whether it's at a city council meeting or on the side. And the other piece of that is social media. I mean, really having the opportunity to be accessible. I can't tell you how many people have private messaged me because that's how they know to find me. But I always have time for coffee, whether it's in a group setting or individually. And I've been doing that since I moved to town. So that wouldn't be anything new. I'd just be expanding my network and communication base.
So we're going to go into some of the really big issues. One of the big ones, and you sort of mentioned them in your opening remarks here, transportation. So we're talking bikes, we're talking public transportation. Can you perhaps talk a little bit about how you're defining the transportation needs that you see in the community, and what a vision for transportation improvements might be?
So transportation, when we talk about it, it's multifaceted, right? Because it comes down to affordable living spaces and getting to and from work and childcare. And we talk about how dense the downtown and the sub-districts of DMC are. Well, how are we going to move people around? That has to be multifaceted. So that has to include everything in regards to transportation. We can't eliminate one and not have the other. But I do believe that we have to look at the public transportation piece. We're a pretty decent-sized city, and we're going to get larger. And I think our public transit, we're behind. We're behind the mark. And we need to get that established because that's how we're going to get our outer neighborhood folks to have that ability to get in and out of the other neighborhoods that they need to get in and out of. So I think public transit, we really need to be proactive. I know that there's some conversation with electric buses. That's a two-prong that hits with some of our energy issues and our environment issues. So I'm really excited that we have some new leadership in the city level that's addressing this, and I think we're going to see more movement in the direction we need to be than we have in the past 3-4 years.
So I'll give a quote, and it is Ed Ruska, but he had one of the meetings probably back in June made some comment, goes, boy, I see a lot of empty buses and empty bike lanes around Rochester. I'm still willing to kind of invest in this, but we have to keep an eye on it. And I understand the concern. But when I hear topics coming up like bike lanes or pedestrian crossings or 3-lane versus 4-lane traffic, I don't think right away of compressing auto travel. I think of public safety. And the fact is, we have a new generation coming up that does want to walk to work or that does want to bike to work. And as a city, looking out 30 and 40 years or 50 years, as you have to with roads, I want that to be an important part of protect public safety, that we have safe ways to get around on bicycles. When you talk about transportation, I like the DMC. A lot of their investment has been this transportation-oriented development, and it's promising. Rochester is a big city. We're over 100,000, but when you look at big, successful public transportation systems, they're much bigger than that. We just don't have the population yet, and then we have this sprawl that makes it hard to use public transportation. I still think, and when I look at the next 4 and 8 years, we still have, I'd like to see us spending more time on our road problems. We've got big development out on 18th Avenue, that's what makes Rochester go out to the south. And we've got 18th Avenue that's carrying much more traffic than they expected. You've got 25th Street is one of the only ways to get down out of some of these neighborhoods that have had expansive growth, and the roads just aren't prepared for what's going on. And I want that to be a priority over the next 4 years too.
And Heather did mention a little bit about the environment, so I want to get back to that a little bit. So there have been great initiatives by the City Council and adopting things like the Environmental Action Plan and things like that. What are your thoughts around specific ways that the community could improve existing and new infrastructure in terms of making it more sustainable environmentally?
All right, so one of the things, major initiatives out of the energy action thing was a sustainability manager on the city, and a lot of that really focuses not so much on the city giving edicts out for new people building. It really has to do with looking at the structures and all the space the city manages right now and doing it in a more sustainable, which lucky for us ends up to be a more efficient way right now. So the city didn't fully fund that position. They did a partial fund, and DMC funded part of it.
Well, we'll be right back. To hear more from Patrick Keane and Heather Holmes, we'll be talking about the environment for sure when we come back. Our Ward 1 candidates for City Council. Stay tuned.
Our town. It's all about you, Rochester. Send us a picture of your favorite feature of Rochester. Rochester at ksmq.org.
Welcome back. Over the next few weeks, we'll be speaking to candidates for Rochester City Council. Today, we're joined by Ward 1 candidates for City Council, Heather Holmes and Patrick Keane. And before the break, we were talking about the environment and the Environmental Action Plan and ways to help facilitate that and implement that. I'll have you.
So what I was talking about is the sustainability manager. The DMC, in combination with some of the city, is funding that position right now, and I think that's helpful. I don't think it's fully funded, and it's something we have to watch going forward. As far as other environmental things, so one of the key things is this kind of projection out into the future that we're going to be fully renewable energy. And I think it's 2036 in the future. These things are tied in RPU, and there's contracts that make it difficult to do. But I think they're really good goals to work towards, and I think there's some promising technology in Minnesota and other places that are going to make that possible.
Thank you.
I would agree. I mean, one of the things that I love to see is the renewable energy conversation that's being had, and there really is. I think more people not just Rochester, are coming on board and understanding that some things have to be done, and they have to be done in a relatively short order. There are things that I think about in regards to adaptive signal technology. If we're going to be doing certain upgrades to make us more of a smart city, we put a little more money up front, but that can save as far as idling vehicles and our public transit buses moving through at a more rapid pace, and the rebate programs that RPU has. I feel like we're having more conversations than ever now about how we are going to become more of a smart city, more energy efficient city, sustainable city. Solar and wind, they're not this weird lofty goal anymore. And maybe there's opportunity for more incentives at a city level when we do have new development or renovations going on with some of those developments to ensure that they're using those types of products.
Thank you. So another big issue, of course, is taxes, and I have a few issues that we'd love to hear from you about. The first one being property taxes, and so of course, the last couple of years, City Council has increased the property taxes, and they're proposing another increase next year. What are your thoughts around that increase? Thoughts around capping the property taxes at some point? Love to hear your thoughts.
So as far as capping, I'm not in a position where I would take a position on capping at this point, because I need to learn more in regards to that. When I'm out talking to folks, I'm surprised how very little property tax comes up, quite honestly. A lot of people are very satisfied with where they live and understand that in order to have the roads they have, in order to have the city we live in, that property tax is part of the beast of burden. That being said, it's always our responsibility as public servants to make sure that we are being frugally responsible and good stewards of the taxpayers' money. So diving in deeper and seeing, are they going where they want them to go? Are our public parks and those green spaces, is money going to them? Are they getting diverted to where they need to go? I think if people understand more where their taxes are going, they're going to be more in tune and open to those taxes being raised, because we want all these amenities, but somebody's got to pay for them. And when we say the city is the people.
So this is a big topic, and I have 2 or 3 different points I want to make. One is since 2013 to now, our taxes have gone up dramatically. A lot of it has to do with the improved economy, and the value of our homes have gone up. But it's also the same time frame of DMC, and I've shared this with the DMC team, that there is a feeling out there that people in Rochester are paying an extra $2 and $4 and $6 a year on their taxes so that we can have this beautiful Hilton downtown. Now, I don't think that's exactly true, but that's a feeling that's out there, and I think as a city council person, I have to be concerned about that. I agree with Heather when she says that people don't mind paying their taxes when they know they're being used wisely. And I've seen that with people saying, what about the parks, and what about the library? And these are important things to them, and what about public safety? And we have to spend wisely on that. The other point that I want to make is I so dislike seeing the September levy being set, and then December we're going to have this final levy, and people are going to be coming in, and the city council is going, well, we have nothing we can do. But you had something you can do in January and February and March and April, and I'd like to find some way that as we approve something, we talk about how much does that cost. And have some, I see the county does this, where they're saying we want to raise the housing authority tax, and it's going to cost, on a $200,000 house, it's going to drive $10 a year on the taxes. I think that sort of communication early in the year is helpful, and I'd like to see the city come around to something like that.
Thank you. Another part of the conversation around taxes too has been, particularly in the last few months, has been this tax increment financing for the Bloom Waterfront project, which is here downtown. What are your thoughts around tax increment financing for projects like the Bloom Waterfront project and other DMC-related development?
So I think most people know tax increment financing, TIF, is when the city basically gives, the property owner doesn't pay the taxes on that property for, and I'm going to say for the first 20 years. So that's how it's paid. It's not city taking money out of its pocket and giving it directly to them. TIF is a tool the city has, and I'm glad we have this tool. If we need something done, like we want a grocery store in downtown, we should use TIF to incent businesses to do that. I like that if we need affordable housing, we should use TIF to do that. Unfortunately, the system in Rochester has been, if a project gets over this size, it should get TIF. And I'd like to change that thinking over time. The one question I'd have for the Bloom project is what kind of things are being generated for the city benefits. There's new park project land there. There's other sort of city amenities that I'm glad to see this builder doing. But I think the question for me would be, would somebody out in Hart Farms need to pay an extra $14 a year for the next 20 years so the Bloom project can be out there? And if that's the case, I would not want to support it.
So when we talk about tax increment financing in TIF, it's not that they're not going to be paying property tax. It'll be static until they agreed upon whether it's 10, 15, or 20 years. That's where the rebate portion comes in. So the city, as Patrick mentioned, the money's not coming out. There's still going to be property tax being paid, but it will be at the level of when that property is purchased and built. And then when you get these larger projects, you have to put in that but-for clause. Would this be built but for? And that's when the city comes in. The city shouldn't be willy-nilly with TIF, but the idea of it is that this is going to increase our tax base, which could either make our taxes stay the same, but possibly come down because of this new development and all that they're bringing. And I feel like the Bloom project, as scary as it seems because it's so large, it's really going to bring us back some incredible tax funding once it's all completed. But it's hard to see the forest through the trees sometimes in regards to that. But I do believe the City Council has a grave responsibility to make sure we're not just handing out TIF left and right, and understanding it and being able to explain it to citizens.
Just to follow up, Nicole, again, the thing about the Bloom project is, what I would ask on a city council member is, are you going to be using police services while you're here? Are you going to be using fire? Do you want that sort of services? Are you going to be asking the city for services, even though on this new value? And if you are, who's going to pay for that? And if it's going to be the citizens of Rochester, then I'm either going to make sure there's a value for the citizens of Rochester, or I want the people who are going to get those values to pay for it.
Thank you both. If you're both elected, not both, if one of you are elected, obviously.
Change the entire structure of council if we're both elected.
If either of you are elected, you'll be joining a city council with some new members, some old members, and very diverse different perspectives. How would you approach working in collaboration, and particularly working through conflicts and differing opinions?
Start with me. All right. First, again, I have been going to city council meetings, and I think I know what people are talking about with this, disruption behavior. But compared to some political bodies, I just don't think it's like this number one problem that we're dysfunctional. I see the council doing the city's business fairly efficiently, not totally efficiently. I feel that my training in business and in some of the other work I've done is very collaborative, and you need to work with other people. City council, there's really no power outside of getting together with 6 other people and voting. And if you do that as this sort of like firebrand and always fighting with everyone, I think you'll be a poor councilman. So I think my natural state is to be collaborative. I look at the existing city council, and I would challenge some people to come with a more open mind. I challenge others to, speak facts and not the disruptive sort of things. So there are some things I'd like to see better, but I think the controlled growth, the transportation going forward, affordable housing, those are the things that I think are the bigger issues, and not everybody getting along.
I actually think that getting along is an important and vital piece of moving forward. I do see a lot of bravado and a lot of stances that sometimes seem to take away from the greater good, and that's unfortunate, but it's not something that can be solved. We have new city leadership. I feel confident with the individuals that are coming in. They're bringing outside perspectives, and I think those perspectives are important as our city continues to grow. You also may have noticed that we have 6 city council members, but only 1 female. We are a progressive city. We pride ourselves on becoming even more progressive. I think we need diversity and voice, and I'd like to be part of that different perspective. I bring that different perspective. I'm younger than some of the individuals on council. You mentioned some of our more seasoned and newer, and I bring that female voice too, which I think is an important piece. When you look at Rochester, we're 50-50, almost split down the middle, men and women. We need to have those perspectives heard and represented.
So many of these topics are interlinked with each other. You've mentioned both in passing a little bit about affordable housing, and I'm going to sort of combine 2 different issues, one around affordable housing and another around inequality in the city and what that looks like. So first, I'd like to hear perhaps how you specifically define affordable housing. That's something affordable housing needs. That's something that there's a lot of different perspectives on. And then secondly, how does it impact, do you think, the inequality in the city? Heather?
All right, that's a loaded question right there. See, I get to go first. Affordable housing, it is a perception of what is affordable to me might not be affordable, to to the senior citizen who's looking to get out of their single family home. And these are a lot of the questions that we've had come up in conversation with the forums we've been in regards to what affordable housing is. I think we have to have kind of city involvement in regards to that. I was just reading in regards to the Essex situation where they've raised the rent on individuals $200, and for some individuals, some citizens, that might not seem a big deal, but when you're mid-lease and you get hit with that, that is a big deal. So I want to learn more on how we can not only just build affordable housing in communities, but how we can take care of the structures we have now, like Bear Creek Church has done with Crossroads.
Go ahead, Patrick.
So affordable housing, it is a hard one. There is a very factual definition of, 60% of median income and things like that, and you shouldn't pay more than 30% of your income in there. There's a lot of different programs that go on, and I don't think any of them are going to solve affordable housing the way most people would interpret it. I'm really glad to see the city participating in the Coalition for Housing. I have dealt with the Rochester area builders on the recent governor's task force report that came out. The thing that interests me though more is not going, and Mike Paradise was big on this, that we can't go right away from affordable housing to building new housing.
Well, thank you, Patrick. So much to talk about, and that's all for today's conversation. Thank you both for joining us today. Next week, we'll be talking with the candidates for Rochester's Ward 3 seat, incumbent Nick Campion and challenger Arlo Kronig. From the University of Minnesota Rochester, we will see you next week on Our Town, the show about Rochester.